Hello everyone, and welcome back to the AMA session MechWarrior 5 number 7 roundup. I'm just going to open this reading a question from Inter, which sadly wasn't answered and should have been. It's a bit of a long one, so we'll start on it. He said, "My question is, why is with barely a month of beta testing for the game before it comes out, it says I beta tested 3 titles and every one had 3 months or longer, and every game said they needed more time to work the bugs out than was given. So why is there a huge lack of beta testing time on this title? Do you guys think there will be suddenly less bugs to work out than any other game? I intend no disrespect or affront with the following question. I only wish to voice a concern that I feel reflects the community barometer. My question is, what kind of questions are we supposed to be asking in an AMA when the topic is UI design procedure, yet we have no up-to-date impressions of what that includes or looks like in any facet of gameplay? Our most recent UI references come from some gameplay footage from MechCon last year, of which the original is no longer available on PGI's Twitch, and, for the more diligent searchers, some freeze frames from an interview shared by Ars Technica on April 3rd, but who knows how old the B-roll footage for that is. Not only is our knowledge of MechWarrior 5's UI obsolete, but, more vitally, we shouldn't need to go to third-party sources to learn about it. It's been requested earlier in this Discord server that we receive some current UI visual aids around which to formulate some informed questions. The absence of these aids is a lost opportunity. We all understand the development process is iterative, so the work-in-progress disclaimer is implicit. We'll forgive you if it changes in the future. Please share with us some material to guide the content of today's discussion. A focused one is advantageous for both sides of the dev community fence. Here's hoping this request is fulfilled in time for the evening's AMA." And it was completely ignored, unfortunately. So many questions in this were related to, I don't know, gameplay, but Russ forbid gameplay-related questions for the most part. And the only times that he stepped in was, weirdly enough, to answer gameplay-related questions with regards to the UI. It seemed like kind of a missed opportunity, and this was a short one as well. 30 minutes was the maximum time allotted, so we'll just get through the questions now. Will weapon quirks be listed in different colours in the UI for legibility and colour blindness? Apparently they're going to make it as easy as possible for people with colour blindness to use the UI. There's a later question regarding colour blindness, and basically the UI itself won't have settings, but there will be, I believe there'll be in-game settings for colour blindness that you'll be able to activate, so hopefully they'll be in there. I'd be surprised if they didn't. How much inspiration from the previous mech games is taken when making the UI, and which games? Apparently they've taken elements from numerous previous MechWarrior titles, but the UI will ultimately be very similar to what we currently have in MechWarrior Online, so if you hate that, you're really going to hate this. How will it improve over their lackluster colourblind accessibility? That was one answer before. What was your favourite part of the UI development? What was your favourite part of the design process? This was a weird question because ultimately it was just kind of like they like taking inspiration from lots of different things. So that was their favourite part. I think it was also making little icons and stuff was their favourite part. See, this is the problem when you have an AMA where they weren't allowed to talk about the gameplay. What is the coolest icon you've had to design? What was the hardest one you had to design? Again, this question just ended up in a kind of general malaise. They took inspiration from lots of other mecha-based products, Gundam, that kind of thing, but wanted everything to remain visually simple and visually clear for you as the player. So that had nothing to do with the icons. Will mouse interactive elements be larger and easier to click than MWO's razor-shaped 12-pixel tall buttons? Apparently previous versions have been very busy, and they aim to make a version that is very easy to read, easy to understand, and without being too overly complex. So hopefully if it's going to be a lot better than MWO's, essentially, from what I can tell. Is the UI generally presented as in-game interfaces, when possible, I guess, or purely as menus? Apparently not everything will be presented as a menu, but they are making it look as close as possible to what you'd expect from an in-universe readout in the Battletech universe. They also talk a lot about having basically projected screens. Apparently it's referred to as a diegetic interface, which is kind of cool. There's a bit more of an example of that further below. But yeah, they're trying to do a mix of menus and in-game user interfaces. So I guess walking around the mech bay, you go to a computer inside the mech bay to be able to select the mech you're going to pilot and who's going to be in what for a co-op session, that kind of thing, and it'll look like it's a console inside the ship rather than just being a menu you bring up. Will the UI be based on MW, or you redesign it for MechWarrior 5? Now, I think the answer to this was, outside of combat, the UI is completely new. As I mentioned before, walking around the dropship hangar bay and stuff, is where that's all going to be completely different. However, in-game, the UI for the cockpit will be pretty much what we have now in MechWarrior Online, but it will be refined and probably streamlined, and probably less sort of glowing orange or whatever colours that we got, or blue for the clanners, I guess. Another question about that, was it possible to modify these? No, I don't think you'll be able to change the colours without using mods. What was the most difficult part of the UI design process? One person noted that the feel of the UI has to be natural, so it's making sure that the UI translates and is important for the end user. Also keeping it visually interesting as well, so things don't get lost, I guess, when you're navigating the menus or clicking around on different things. That was an important element for them, so they had to make sure that that was that translated properly, and was kind of difficult apparently to get around. So with all the UI elements available, will all the UI elements be available in third person? As in MechWarrior Online, if you go into third person, you've got nothing basically. In this game, yes, for the most part, you will be able to play entire missions in third person if you wish. So that's pretty cool. The reason for this is because it's not PvP, it's PvE, so they don't have to worry about cheating. What's some of the big differences from Embryo to 5? Apparently, the game feels more like you're in a mech. It's more immersive with as far as the UI is concerned. They mention it having a kind of sense of weight. I guess the idea of it feeling more immersive being that it has more interactive elements in the sense of when you take hits or when you're seeing damage light up on your mech, that kind of thing. The UI will feel like it's actually a real thing rather than just an overlay, which you have in MechWarrior Online. So apparently there's a big difference between the two. There's no panels in MechWarrior 5, there's more of a floating UI instead. So I guess everything is kind of projected towards you from the different cockpit elements, such as your paper doll and your ammunition, weapons loadout and stuff like that. What's been the hardest aspect of building on the lo-fi industrial aesthetic of the setting while keeping the UI modern? They didn't really talk about the lo-fi aesthetic, but they did mention that a lot of their inspiration and influences for the UI itself has been based on a lot of modern military user interfaces, I guess for things like jet fighters and armoured vehicles, that kind of thing. They've got a lot of documentation of these different elements that they've been using to incorporate into the design. Will the MechLab colour scheme remain for weapons and equipment? This is regards to, are they going to be sort of yellow for energy weapons, green for missiles, that kind of thing? Yes, apparently it will be. How strict have you been to avoid an intrusive UI? They're trying to keep the designs good looking while streamlined so they aren't too intrusive, but they wanted them to look good and be easy to use. The mech HUD is intended to be as immersive as possible without getting in your way during combat. Will there be a visual indicator for weapon jamming? Yes, there will. Let's see. Is the UI interactive with the environment as much as possible with numerous floating elements and having them blend with the environment? Apparently, your these floating elements can be affected by certain impacts. So if you get hit by PPC, they might sort of become static and flicker a bit and then come back online for you. So yeah, they're trying to make it as sort of interactive as possible. Other than NWO, what would you say has been the biggest inspiration for the overall UI experience? This one was good because they mentioned that they've taken inspiration from other games like Alien Isolation, Star Wars Battlefront, Battlefield, games with lots of floating elements for their UI design. They mentioned a more recent example would be the Division series with the floating elements that you see on the for interacting with different items in the environment, and Dead Space being able to see your health bar in the back as a kind of floating interface, that kind of thing. So that was what they used as a lot of their sort of influences when coming up with the design. How will damage be represented in the HUD? We're going to have traditional paper dolls, good old paper dolls. Another question talked about these, but apparently every paper doll, they're aiming to be unique for the mech or the vehicle that you're currently engaging or targeting. So if you lock onto an Atlas, the paper doll will look like an Atlas. If you lock onto a Jenna, it will look like a Jenna. So yeah, that'd be pretty cool. They're not sure yet whether all mechs will have unique paper dolls. An example is the catapult with the missile ears or the K2 with its gun ears. They're not sure yet, though they did say that maybe some of those with very specific changes might get in there before release, but any that they do miss that just have a kind of generic paper doll will probably be added in after launch. Let's see. I would love to see elements of the UI represented in a physical cockpit, such as a kill count indicator coming to mind. Is there any plans having little features like this in the game? Stuff like heat indicators, current target, speedometer, and if not, will it be doable with mods? A lot of that stuff, this is talking about the diegetic interface. To explain, it's viewed as a kind of holographic projection from the physical item. They were talking about how you could use, in real life, how you'd have a watch that you'd look at, and the watch screen would project the information that you're looking at to you as a user, so that's the idea. Is the HUD similar to MWO, which was a later question? Yes, apparently it will have things. Your minimap will be in the middle, bottom of the screen. You'll have your weapons order on the right, jump jets on the left for heat management, your paper doll there, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's going to be very similar but new. That's what they said. So I guess basically like a massive overhaul of what we already have. They said when your mech takes damage, let's say an arm explodes, like described, does the UI flicker and get sort of more staticky and or anything like that when damage occurs? They said there is some feedback from hits visually, depending on the weapon, via sound and other HUD interfaces from the force of the hit. Also, apparently your communications can screw up briefly after you've been hit. There's a question about ultra-wide support. They are working as hard as possible making that work. Isn't a concern at the moment, so it's likely it will be in probably by the beta in August. Will we see any damage feedback from weapon and ammo destruction? An example in tabletop is listed as feedback damage through the Neuro helmet. Apparently, unique paper dolls from the majority. They've done a lot of work on making sure you can see armor or internal damage at a glance on these paper dolls. Ammo statistics, destroyed weapons. These can all be counted as the feedback damage, though not in the sense of you actually feeling it as a pilot. The paper dolls will also show if a mech is taking ammunition explosion damage internally, that kind of thing. And the final one, will cockpit monitors play a part in the UI? Apparently some will have some level of interactivity, though they didn't go into it much beyond that. And sadly that's it. That was pretty much all they could get through in 30 minutes. There is some interesting elements there. It's nice to know that now that we have an idea of sort of what it will look like, but I do agree with the question and the statement that I read out earlier from Inter. It does need some kind of reference for us as players, so we know the kind of questions to ask. Would have been really helpful. A screenshot that could have just shown a work in progress UI would have been a big help. So a lot of these things, the problem is with these, everyone's going to imagine different things now, and we have no idea what it is they're talking about, unfortunately. Hopefully in the future they will post up an image, but by then it will be a little too late with regards to how this AMA went. There's going to be a second one, obviously, for the North American time zone, so there might be some other questions there. Who knows, they might even get around to posting a UI screenshot then, so if you are in the Discord, try and keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, if that does appear, I'll try and post. If they do post up an image of the UI, I'll copy it over to the Critical Rocket Discord so people can see it. Other than that, that wraps up another AMA session. I don't know how many more of these we've got left. I would hope that we're going to see a modding one at some point. They still have July, so I suspect that we'll probably get another 2 in July, and then August we're going to go into the beta phase. And then it's in early September for the release, so I don't really know how many more AMA sessions we're going to get. They'll probably do another general AMA in the meantime, I suspect. One about modding, I wouldn't be surprised, and maybe a couple of very minor ones out, where they can fit one in. But yeah, personally, as an end thing, I would prefer now less AMA sessions and more gameplay footage. Show us, do what other games are doing these days, where they... Total War is a great example. The new Total War game, prior to it releasing, had an element that was telling us about the new diplomacy system, the new combat system, how hero characters worked, the overall map. This is all things that they could do instead. They could make these videos that they could show people who have pre-ordered the game so they can see the Inner Sphere map. How big is it? How many systems can we travel around? What does the negotiation for contracts look like? Show us some damage scaling, show us a mech fresh, and then when it's heavily damaged, show us some of the destruction, the movement, building destruction, that kind of thing. So the vehicles we'll be encountering, the different types of biomes. These are all things that they could be doing now. I don't really know how much more an AMA session can really squeeze out, but outside of the modding one, which personally I think for a lot of people is going to be one of the most important, because modding is going to be the big thing for MechWarrior 5. And there's the phone. It's all go here, so I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.